Hello there. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm Colleen Klimczak. I'm an organizational and productivity coach and a certified professional organizer. I own Peace of Mind Professional Organizing, LLC. Since 2003, I've been helping my clients live better lives through organizing and organizational and productivity coaching. I support my clients and my community with coaching, in-person and virtual organizing, my weekly podcast called Your Organized Life with Colleen Klimczak, a free weekly virtual productivity session called Finish Line Friday, a free weekly email newsletter, and regular content on Facebook and Instagram. I also offer presentations and professional development to groups and companies. And coming soon, I'll be launching a membership circle to support my community with even more coaching and productivity content. Want to finish strong this week? Join me for Finish Line Friday every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Central for a 2-hour productivity session. Drop me an email at colleen@peaceofmindpo.com to request my Zoom room link or follow the Zoom room link on my Instagram or Facebook pages. Welcome to Your Organized Life, episode 151. Today's topic is planning and doing. Specifically, respecting the planning but committing to the doing. I mentioned that I recently gave my paper management presentation 3 times in 7 days. Yep, I am making the rounds, my friends, but that is not the point for today. There is a point that I make in my paper management presentation specifically, and perhaps less specifically in my Clear the Clutter or downsizing presentations. And that is this, that planning and doing are 2 different activities. They're both essential to getting something done, but they're very different. They deserve their own respect, their own time and tools, and we don't get to skip one to get to the other. Because if we do, chaos, or on the other hand, stuckness, reigns, right? I often mention in my presentations that there are 2 ways to derail your organizing process. The second is to buy containers before you actually know what you're containing and where. So don't do that. But the first way to derail an organizing or productivity project is to start without a plan. When it comes to tackling a clothes closet, or organizing the garage for fall, or setting up our paper management system, before we touch one shirt or shovel or piece of paper, we need to start with a plan, and therefore with planning. Even more specifically, when it comes to paper management, as I recommend participants and clients gather their tools and supplies to get started on their project, I make sure that they add a notebook or note-taking device like a notes app on your phone to the list of required items. Because when we start to move around our papers or our stuff or our thoughts or our calendar, we start to generate ideas and also tasks. And we need to make sure to make note of those ideas and tasks while we're doing the organizing or planning work. For example, that can sound like, aha, here is that overdue ComEd bill, or, ooh, look, here is that reminder to make a dentist appointment for my regular cleaning, or, oh, here's that magazine with that article that I want to read, or, look, here's that photo of our trip to the Grand Canyon. I wonder what the weather is like in the Grand Canyon right now. I'm going to look that up on my phone. Yeah, we can see how that's going to cause trouble, right? Put down the phone, put down the bill, put down the magazine and the photo. Yes, put them down. Take a break, take a breath, pause for a moment with me, because during an organizing or planning session is not the time to also act on those ideas. Perhaps immediately afterwards, in the case of paying that overdue electric bill. But as we get through our backlog of mail or papers on the kitchen counter or dining room table, we put the bills to pay in a pile, and we add a recurring appointment every week or every other week to our calendar, and we call it bill paying time. We set aside that magazine to read later today when we're taking a break and not right now. We do not stop what we're doing, sorting papers, getting through the backlog, identifying the tasks, to do the tasks, right? Because that would stop our forward movement of planning and forsake it for doing, right? For example, and I loved this, when I explained the premise of today's article to my spouse, he said, oh, like planning Thanksgiving dinner and making Thanksgiving dinner are two very different things. Yes, that was brilliant. And he said, what I'm spending 15 minutes saying, he said it in 12 seconds. Well done. The reminder is planning and doing are two different activities. I like to plan my work, personal and professional, first thing in the morning for the rest of the day. It is tempting to hop up and go do a million things instead of plan, but then later, I might find myself reacting to things or wandering aimlessly. And hey, don't get me wrong, some days aimlessness is awesome. But, if I have something specific I want to do or need to do, or a specific place I got to go, I really need to plan first. Because planning and doing are two different activities. When I coach with my clients, the first questions we ask in a session, other than a hello and a quick catch up, is, what are we working on today? What question did you bring to our session today? What makes it important now? What outcomes are you seeking today during our time together? And how will we know when we've been successful? Yeah, all those questions sound a lot like planning. And we make sure to do that before we actually jump into the coaching session work. Now, we can also check in during a session, either coaching or organizing, and make sure that that plan is being implemented and that the work is on track. That often happens so naturally that we forget that those two activities are separate, but they are. Not respecting the idea that they are separate but vital is a really easy way to get off track. And I would like it for you to not get off track. That is my hope for you, and it's definitely my hope for myself. Planning and doing are two different activities. I completed a productivity coaching course this past May. It was an interesting phenomenon that all of my fellow students and I commented on. We were coaches learning about tools to help work with our clients on productivity, but we were also learning how to use the same tools for ourselves to boost our own productivity. So sounds like a win-win to me. The productivity coaching course was based on a concept called the productivity chain, and we used the book by the same name, so Productivity Chain, written by Casey Moore, PCC, CPO, PCOC, who was also our instructor. It was a great course. The premise behind the course and the book is that there are 12 individual but related components to productivity. I'm going to list them all. Boundary setting, communications and relationships, decision-making, delegation, drive, goal setting and prioritization, health, organization of objects and data, planning, reinvention, resources, and task and project management. In the course, we explored each of these areas and how to assess and coach around them for our clients and also for ourselves. And it really is great. So if you're interested in learning more, please reach out to me via email or text or however you want to find me on social media. So for me personally, I scored strongly in many areas, and I am proud of that and of those. So some areas I have always been strong in, but I'm also even more proud of the ones that I have worked to improve upon over the years, like my communications and my decision making. For today's topic, not surprisingly, given who I am and what I do, I scored really high on planning. And that's not a flex or a brag. We all should know what we're good at and be ready to work with those skills. Let me be the first to tell you, though, as a professional organizer, yes, I really love to plan. Thinking about the work from different angles, noting all the large and small details, imagining the best strategies for getting things done, yes, that is my jam. However, I also know that because I love it so much, I can spend way too much time on planning and not enough time on doing. For me, planning is easier and more fun. And if my schedule is full of hard work or heavy lifting, either physically or metaphorically, it is really tempting to just stick with planning. And yet, per Casey in the Productivity Chain book, she says, in quotes, "Your planning link operationalizes your work, preparing it for action," end quote. Which reminds us that planning is separate from doing. It is preparing us to act, and we still need to act. Planning is essential, but planning alone doesn't make progress. We have to do both the planning and the doing, and we have to recognize they're not the same. Planning and doing are two different activities. Now, here's a funny, if you've stuck with me this long. I have my podcast, obviously, and at last week's NAPO Chicago meeting and service project with the Chicago Furniture Bank, a friend and fellow organizer asked me how the podcast was going. She's a listener, love that. I'm not going to mention names, but if she's hearing this, she knows who I'm talking about. This was as we were all assembling tables. That was our part of the service project. So there were a few other organizers on our service project team, and so I shared a little bit more about the podcast, that I had just recorded episode 150, that it's going well. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing. And then what I often add, because it's funny and it breaks the ice, is that when my husband mentions my podcast, he assures people that the episodes are short. And we all laughed because I could be offended by that, but I'm not. He's right. They are short. And that is by design and by intention, because planning and doing are two different activities, right? So my podcast episodes can be considered the planning and maybe the inspiration before the doing. So the idea is that you would hop in for a short, fun, motivational 15 minutes or so, and then get on with the doing part of your day. Because I'll say it one more time, planning and doing are two different activities. Support around getting things done is what productivity coaching is all about. If it's time to invest in yourself and explore coaching for organizing and productivity, I would love to hear from you. Drop me a line via email at colleen@peaceofmindpo.com or message me through my social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you next week.